An 18 to 180 millimeter lens from the old Four Thirds system. Is that anything worse today? Let's have a look. Short time ago I bought this 18 to 180 millimeter Four Thirds lens for very little. I think I paid around €50 for it. It's not a Micro Four Thirds, it's a Four Thirds, but with an adapter I can also use it on Micro Four Thirds cameras. The corresponding focal length in full frame terms is 36 to 360 millimeter. So very long telephoto reach, but not very good at the wide end. I would have preferred it has started from 28 or maybe even 24 millimeters in full frame terms. But it's quite good for the long end, for the telephoto end, and I have other lenses I use for wide angles, so it's okay. I thought this could be a good travel lens for this camera, or maybe on my Micro Four Thirds cameras. The lens has a manual focus ring here, but it doesn't work when the camera is turned off, so it's electronically controlled, and it has a ring to set the focal length, but that is locked now by this small button here. So when I unlock it, I can turn it to 180 millimeters and it becomes a very long lens. But the good thing about this lens is that if I take it off, it's not a very huge lens actually, and it only weighs in at 435 grams, so not very heavy compared with the 10 times zoom range that this lens has. I have this adapter by the name of vodka, or I don't know how it's pronounced actually, and it has electronics in it. So when I mount the lens on this one, I can now mount this lens on my Micro Four Thirds cameras. So I can use this old lens on these cameras as well. And if I take my Olympus OM-D M5 camera here and mount it, this is what it looks like. It's a bit on the large side on this camera, of course, but it's also a 10 times zoom lens, so of course it must be rather big. But autofocus works very nicely when it's mounted on the Olympus OM-D M5. Sorry. And also on the old Four Thirds cameras, autofocus works quite nicely. It's not as fast as many modern lenses, but it's decent for my purpose. I don't shoot sports with it. When I go traveling and use that kind of lens, I'll often use for portraits, and I'll also use it for shooting landscapes and nature in general. So very nice lens for that. But does this lens give you sharp images? I mean, it's a huge focal range from 18 to 180. So let's have a look at some images I shot with this camera. I've done images with 18 millimeter and then 180 millimeter of the same subjects, and then some of them I also shot somewhere in the middle, just to show you how sharp it is there. And at the end I'll also show you some samples from my studio setup. So let's have a look at that. following shots are taken on the OM-D M5 with the 4K adapter, just to show you what kind of background blur this lens can give you different f-stops. And I'm also showing you how close you actually can get with this lens. It's not a specific macro lens, but you can get pretty close and do some semi-macro shots. Another example of the macro capability of the lens. Bright, beautiful flowers, and also this small Buddha statue in my home. Notice the depth of field. The nose is not really sharp here at the lowest aperture, but if you stop down here at f9, the nose is also sharp, so just a few centimeters of sharpness. And here notice how the background highlights are rendered here wide open, and if I stop it down, you see the aperture form, and you also see some onion-like structure in the background highlights. Now let's look at vignetting and sharpness in my studio setup here, shown in my post-processing program, which is Darktable. We can see that we have here the image from 18mm at f3.5 on the left and f8 on the right. There's a bit of difference in the lighting of the two images, but not much vignetting in any of them. So let's look here in the center at the sharpness of these two images. One can see that 3.5 is slightly soft, whereas f8 is much better, pretty sharp in the middle here. If we then go to the corners, we can see that f3.5 is definitely not very sharp. f8 again sharper here in the corners also. Then let's go to f8 versus f16. We can see here in the corner that f16 is even a bit sharper here, but I think if we look in the middle, it's not so much a difference. Yeah, f16 is a bit sharper, so diffraction is actually not having any effect here. f16 is sharper than f8. Usually I'd expect that if f16 diffraction would set in and make the image less sharp, but it's not the case here. Now these images are shot in the middle of the range at 105mm, and here the most open aperture is f5.8, and on the right we have 105mm at f8, so not that big a difference, but let's look at the sharpness in the center. We can see here that there's not so much difference. We've stopped it down a bit because the most open aperture here, 5.8, sorry, as I said, not so much difference to f8. So we can't see that big a difference. But if we look in the corners, we can see that f5.8 is much less sharp than f8. So some difference here. And then if we move on to f8 compared to f16, it's again well, they are actually quite equal here at this setting. If we now look at 180mm here on the left at 6.3, which is the most open aperture, and on the right at f8, again we shouldn't see much difference here, because it's actually stopped down a bit already. And if we zoom into the middle, well, it seems actually like f6.3 is sharper than f8, and maybe a bit more contrasty on f8. And if we look to the corners, yeah, it's the same thing here. So 6.3 is just as good as f8. But let's look then at f8 versus f16 here. Almost same sharpness, maybe slightly sharper at f16. And what about the middle of the image? Well, f8 is actually better than f16 here. So yeah, somewhat funny performance from this lens. This lens has no stabilizer in it, but there's a stabilizer in this camera body and also in my Olympus OM-D M5 camera. A very nice image stabilizer built into the body, so I don't need it in the lens. I hope you liked the review of the Olympus Digital 18 to 180mm zoom lens, which is quite an astounding focal range. So I think it can be good if you just stop it down a bit, as you saw in the images. At the wide end, at least, it's a bit soft when you have it wide open. And at the long end, the same. In the middle, it's much better, and that's quite normal for many zoom lenses to behave like this. So not an unusual behavior from this old piece of glass. If you liked the video, please subscribe to my channel and also hit the like button. So thank you very much for this time, and bye for now.